Hi there, I'm Jessica Atkinson, and this here is my lovely friend and assistant, Veronica. And we are here today to teach you a little bit about owning your health. And this is an 8-week course that her and I will be teaching. It covers such an array that I can't possibly give you a full understanding of what the course entails, but we're going to do our best today. We're going to try to have fun. What you'll need is basically a computer. Maybe you just want to take a seat to begin with. We're going to be focusing more on the anatomy. And then afterwards, if you just have a space basically the size of your body when lying down, that would be enough. We're just going to go through a few stretches and some strengthening exercises that pertain to the anatomy. And then we'll just talk a little bit afterwards. So I'm really excited to dig into this, and let's get going. So again, like I said, we're starting with anatomy, and Veronica, I'm going to use you as an example. Thank you very much. That was her version of consent, which was not saying anything. But we're going to talk about the knee, and I just want to explain before I get into this even deeper, or not that deep, is that there's so much more anatomy on the knee than what we're going to talk about. But for the purpose of time, I'm going to show you the main important ones. So the knee joint, we all have knees, 2 of them. It is comprised of 3 different bones specifically. So we have our large femur right here, or our thigh bone, a lot of people like to call it. And that goes from our hip to our knee. And then we have our tibia, which is just down here, along here. So this is like your shin bone, popularly known as. And so you can see the femur and the tibia, they actually just connect along these little plateaus, which do have a name, but I'm not going to get into that. And then the third bone is actually our patella, or our kneecap. And the patella is actually a really cool bone because it doesn't actually attach via ligaments. It's only attached by muscles and a tendon into this bone. So it's special, and it's also problematic for that reason. But pretty cool bone. It's technically called a sesamoid. Love it. So that's our knee joint. And like I said, there's tons of ligaments. There's, capsules. You got your meniscus, those kinds of words we've heard before. But I'm not going to talk about those today specifically. However, I do want to get into just specifically what the joints are called and what their movements are. So again, using Veronica here, we have our femur and our tibia, which makes our tibiofemoral joint. Makes sense. And that joint just does simple knee extension and then knee flexion. So straightening of our knee and bending of our knee. And then, as you can see, there is a little bit of gap here. I mean, this isn't completely anatomically correct. Don't tell her I said that. But it does do a little bit of internal and external rotation here, not a lot. So that's turning your toe in and out, that kind of motion. And then the second joint, and this one is the more commonly talked about joint, but it's our patellofemoral joint. So it's our patella where it connects with our femur, and that is the joint. And so that is, the motion it does is the patella, as we straighten our knee, it slides up the femur. It's unfortunately drilled in here, but it slides up the femur as we straighten it, and then as we bend it, it slides down. And so that just allows the muscles to track properly. Thank you so much, Veronica. Yes, isn't she lovely? So that is our knee, the bones and joints. We skipped over ligaments. And that's just the basic knowledge. If you were to take the 8-week course, we would go into a lot more detail, not just on the knee, but the entire human body. Because if you don't understand how the body is, how can you understand how it works, right? It's like an author can't write a book if they can't write words. Simple as that. So let's just move on and talk about something a little bit more functional. I find this part a little bit more fun. And that is the muscles in that region, the muscles that help move the knee joint, and ways we can help to make them more functional, be more proactive in potentially how they're feeling. So let's just look at the first slide here, which is going to be our quad muscles. And Justice will get there, but let me just tell you our quad muscles. It says quad, well, they're called quadriceps. And quad means 4, right? So there's actually 4 muscles that comprise our quads. And as you can see in this picture here, they all start up at the hip joint. There's one that starts actually on the femur. but you can't see it here. And then they all insert actually into the kneecap or the patella like we were talking about. So on Veronica here, it's starting up in the hip joint, and then it inserts into this one little tiny bone. And then from there, it actually forms a tendon which attaches into here. So you can see why when you bend your knee, some of us can't bend our knee fully. Potentially we have tight quads because it's not allowing us to pull down that kneecap properly, and then it causes friction on this bone. That kind of stuff, right? So that's why it's important to understand the quads and where they feed into, and then where they end up, which is actually past the knee joint. So it starts at the hip, ends past the knee joint. So some things we can do to help with that, because a lot of times our quads as well, as you can see there's 4 of them, you know, maybe the ones on the outside or the lateral side, they get tight and they start pulling, and you know, it's causing some knee pain and you don't know why, or on the inside it gets tight, although usually it's the outside and the inside's loose. So it's gonna pull on that knee, and it's not gonna feel great. It could be simple things like walking. It could be simple things like, you know, bending down to pick something up and, oh, my knee, that hurts. And so sometimes that's what happens. And so a great option is actually, for strengthening your quads, is our typical squats. I mean, there's lots of other exercises you can do. If you want something really specific, I always recommend seeing a physio, talking to somebody professional. But I'm gonna talk you through a basic squat because I think they're functional, like I said. You know, a squat basically is sitting in a chair, getting up out of a chair, sitting down to go to the washroom, and then getting up successfully. It's, you know, climbing stairs, it's bending down to pick something up. I think everybody does squats every day, but whether or not they're doing them properly and whether or not it doesn't hurt is another question. So number one thing I'm gonna say before I show you this, how to do a squat properly, is if it hurts, don't do it. If you don't feel safe, don't do it, yeah? There are ways to make it easier, there's ways to make it safer. I'm gonna show you the basic, and then I'm gonna show you other alternatives. So your basic squat, you're gonna wanna have your feet planted, just kind of hip width apart, and your knees are tracking, like if you bend your knees a little bit, they're gonna track directly over your toes, yeah? So in a squat, like I said, instead of just bending our knees and pushing the knees forward, we actually wanna try to make a 90-degree angle. So we're actually sitting back into a chair or onto a toilet, whatever you wanna think about. You're sitting back and you're trying to take that weight back while keeping your chest up, yeah? So sometimes I like to put my hands across my chest, taking the sit bones back, and then sitting. And another thing you wanna watch for is knees going out or knees going in, yeah? You wanna track them perfectly over your toes, okay? So that's your simple squat, something that's really great for strengthening. You can also do, if you wanna modify that, let's say you're having a really hard time with that, that's where a chair is actually super helpful. And the reason is because sometimes it's the getting up that's the hard part. So I often will recommend sitting in a chair, yeah, you've got that 90-degree squat position, but you've got the support underneath you. So you're gonna put your hands across your chest, whoops, just like you would normally, and then you're just gonna get up, yeah? So that is a squat with assistance. But let's say maybe getting down is the hard part, or the part you're having troubles with. You can also lower yourself down. And if you're scared, feel free to use your hands. Or if it hurts when you're going up, but not when you're going down, you can use your hands to help you get up and then lower down slowly. Yeah, so there's alternatives, there's ways to get around it. And that's one of the main things I want to talk about in this course is just the options. You know, it's not like you have to do it one way, it's not like you have to do it another way. You're not a failure if you can't do it. There's always options, there's always alternatives, which I think is super amazing and super great and one of the best things about this stuff. But let's move on. That's your quads. Love the quads, they do a lot for us. Let's talk about our hamstrings. So I'm gonna turn Veronica around and get the next slide going here. But our hamstrings are super cool. Originally called hamstrings because they used to hang pigs by this section of their body. Really gross, too much information. But I thought that's kind of cool, fun fact. And so as you can see on the screen, our hamstrings have 3. And the one is just gonna, so this leg here is a right leg. So the big biceps femoris, it's the biggest hamstring, the most commonly common issues with that one, and it actually inserts on the outside of the knee there, and then the other two, semitendinosus and semimembranosus, insert on the inside of the knee. And our hamstrings like to assist with bending the knee, yeah? So you can see how they both attach on the other end of the knee, so right here, and it starts here. So if this line were to squeeze or tighten, it actually brings your knee up, yeah? So that's the main action. Or if our leg's forward, our hamstrings tightening bring the leg back down. Thank you, Veronica. I'm gonna break her. Oh no. That's okay, she'll just stay bent forever, I guess. So does that make sense? They kind of, when they tighten, they pull in that direction. So, you know, basically we're using our hamstrings every time we walk, yeah? Our leg is straight and ahead of us, it tightens and pulls us back. Yeah, it's how we get propelled. So we walk a lot, most people walk a lot in a day, or if not a lot, they walk some, everybody walks. So a lot of times hamstrings actually get quite tight. I think a lot of people can agree their hamstrings are tight, not everybody. So I'm just gonna show a couple stretches and alternatives for stretches for the hamstrings. And again, no pain, you don't want this to hurt. If you can't breathe through it, if it's really, really hurting you, you're doing too much. And there's alternatives again. So I'm gonna start by showing you the easiest one you can do. And that is using a chair, maybe something lower, just the ground, something higher, whatever you need. You're just gonna take your leg and you're gonna put it on the chair. I like to use a flex foot. It doesn't really matter, you can have it not flexed. Actually, let me take my shoe off. So you can have it just on the chair, and you're gonna stand as nice and tall as you can, and you're just gonna take your hips, so see this is my hip bone, and you're just gonna tip at the hip bone. So you want the bottom of your glutes to push out behind you, nice tall, long spine, and you're reaching forwards towards your toes. You don't need to physically reach, you can just kind of rest your hands on your leg if you want, but you should feel a nice stretch behind your back of your leg here, so that's your hamstrings. Now, you might find that's too hard, too easy, too unstable. You know, if you're gonna fall over, don't be doing anything, crazy. So if you find that's the case, a couple other really great options. You can sit on the ground, yeah. You can have both legs, which can be really handy, you get two at once. Same thing, so both legs are just straight out in front of you, you're sitting nice and tall, and then you're gonna tip at the hips, reaching forwards to get a nice stretch behind the back of the legs. And don't hunch over, don't be all lazy about it. Really think actively reaching forwards, yes? And again, if that's still too much for you and you want something easier, lying down is a great option for two reasons. You get to lie down, who doesn't love that? And the second reason is you can actually do it easier and with a bent leg. So if I lay down and stretch my left leg here, even with my knee bent and pulling my knee in, you can actually get a hamstring stretch here. And if you don't get enough with the knee fully in, you can straighten the leg a bit more. If, even with a knee bent and with pulling it's still too much, you can actually take a towel, I'm gonna use my sweater here as an example, and you can just wrap it around your ankle and use that to kind of hold it in place. Yeah, so that's a great example of all of the different ways of stretching your hamstring. And you know, there's more. If none of those work for you, I think we can always find another option, which is why this is a great course, because we get to work one-on-one. We get to talk about these things. What do you need? What do you want? So yeah, those are just some awesome examples of some hamstring stretches. And call me nerdy, but I think stretching's super fun and makes you feel great. So on that topic, let's move on to the next little set of muscles, which I want to show you, or not muscles, but it's actually your IT band or your iliotibial band. So on the next slide, it'll show you here. You can see this is a person standing sideways. So if I were this body, I'm standing like this, and this is the hip, and the IT band actually goes all the way down into your knee. So your IT band or iliotibial band, it's not actually a muscle. It's actually some fibrous fascial tissue, but it stems from the TFL, or tensor fasciae latae muscle. It's kind of in the front of the hip, so it's like up in here. And then also your glute max, which comes around the back here. You can see them in this picture and they're labeled. And so a lot of times we get some pain on our lateral knee or outside of our knee. just from the band feeling tight, and the band feels tight because of our hip muscles tightening. So the hip muscles are for a different time. I do have a lot of, glute strengthening, glute stretching stuff we can do. But I just wanted you to see today this view of the thigh from the side, because it's super important to understand what this looks like and why we might have issues the way we do. And there's some great options like, foam rolling it, of course, safely and without pain. That's a whole other class. I mean, I've got tons of information about rolling and the importance of it. Of course, you might not have a foam roller, so there's other options like using a tennis ball, just self-massaging the area. Yeah, so there's lots we can do for this, and just never enough time. So take that picture in. One more section I want to talk to you about before we're wrapping this up, and that's just your calf area. So on the next slide, you'll see we generally refer to this section of our lower leg as the calves, but the calves have multiple different muscles. The one I want to look at is actually our gastrocs or gastrocnemius muscle. And so, as you can see in the picture, and as I'm going to show you on Veronica here, it actually starts at our heel and inserts into our femur. So it goes across the knee joint, which is why it's important right now. And again, our gastrocs actually does a lot and really doesn't need much strengthening because it does so much. I mean, every time we walk, our gastrocs is working. Every time we reach for that thing on a shelf that we can't get to, that's your gastrocs firing, and working. So I'm just gonna quickly talk you through some simple gastroc stretches, because I think if anything, we all need to stretch them more. And so I'm gonna use a chair, but I think this is better on a wall. You're gonna want to have something to stabilize yourself. You're just gonna stand with your feet together, pointing towards the wall, hands for stabilization. You're gonna slide, right now I'm gonna do my right foot back. You can feel free to try this with me. Yeah, you can start with both legs straight. We're gonna bend the front leg, holding for stabilization. And then you're gonna push the back heel into the ground and lift up the front of the hips. So you should start to feel a nice, gentle stretch. If it's too much, slide your foot in. If it's too little, slide your foot out, I don't feel a huge stretch here, but for other people, this could be the biggest stretch in the world, and that's okay. You can also sometimes push into the wall a bit more to create that pressure. That'll help increase the stretch. So this is a great one you can do because you can pretty much do it anywhere. There's lots of places to stretch your calves. And then one more, if you just want to do a little bit more of an advanced version, is your simple downward dog is great, and you can get your calves and your hamstrings in one stretch. So for anybody who doesn't know, just walking your hands out. I like to do this with a little bend to my knees because it can just be too much. But yeah, you're just gonna bend at the hips. So I got a nice V here. Bending at the hips, reaching your glutes towards the ceiling and pushing your heels into the ground. Yeah? Never forget to breathe. Never forget to take time. So in all of these stretches, I always say 30 seconds at least, to not do 30 minutes, and a maximum of 2-minute holds. Because once you hold it for 2 minutes, the tissues are not changing. Holding it for 5 minutes it's no better than 2 minutes. So max 2 minutes, minimum 30 seconds. So yeah, that's our knee joint. That's the bones. We didn't really talk about ligaments, but there's ligaments, that's the joints, and that's the muscles, the main ones. There are so many more muscles we did not talk about, but I want to just end with talking a little bit about another part that's just super important to me, because a lot of the times when we start talking about these things, we start self-diagnosing and going, oh, that's what's wrong with me. Oh my gosh, Veronica, I ruined you. Oh my gosh, I feel so bad. That's okay, I'll figure that out later. But we start thinking there's all these things wrong with us, or that we've got that. In my course, there's 2 classes that are super dear to me and I'm super excited about, and I think right now especially, they're super relevant. And the first one, I have a whole class dedicated just to mental health and a whole class dedicated to chronic pain. And you might be thinking, I'm not in chronic pain, I don't need that. Well, we all need that, because at some point we either know someone affected by chronic pain, or we ourselves might start to feel like we have chronic or persistent pain. And so I'm excited to just dig into that with you a little bit, shift some ideas on what pain is and how we can cope with it, and potentially even just, taking it so this course isn't just about the biological self, it's also about your, psychological self and your social self. So creating a community, creating a discussion, and finding ways to cope, I think is super important, especially right now with the state of 2020 in the world, which also leads me into my other class, which I'm super excited about, which is mental health, because if our mental health is not, if we're not connected and we're not understanding it or trying to understand it, we can't even begin to understand this. This does not cure itself with these stretches and these strengthenings, if I'm having a bad day, I'm going to feel it in my body. If I'm having a great day, I'm going to feel that in my body, and that's awesome. So that's why mental health is super important to me. It should be super important to you, and that's kind of my crash course on this course. So if you're thinking, wow, that was a lot of information, this would be a great option for you. If you're thinking, I want to know more about the knee, this is also a great option because we're going to talk more and more. There's more information about the knee. There's more information about everything. And if you're thinking, man, mental health is real, you also should take this course. It's going to be hard, it's going to be challenging, but I really hope to create a community where we can uplift each other, be there for each other, work with each other, learn from each other, and just, create that community we don't get right now. So on top of everything we've talked about today, if you're looking at this and going like, man, I got bad knee pain, or I've got other things going on, I am not a doctor. I am an RMT, but I think there's a certain point where you need to get referred out. So, if it's really bad or you're wondering, don't come to me first, go to your doctor. If you want something more specific to yourself, that's where your physio comes into place. There's chiropractors, you can go see an RMT. I just don't want you to get the thought that I'm here to diagnose you and tell you what's up. This is just a course to give you the information so that you can manage your health properly. And your health includes going to see a professional when it's necessary. So, yeah, take this course. Should be really fun. And sometimes challenging, but that's reality. So, yeah, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Veronica, for assisting me. And yeah, see you soon.